Hello there, and welcome to Whispered Knowledge. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day. Maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep to deep thoughts and meaningful questions rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. You've got nothing to do but rest. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your body grow light. Because tonight, we're exploring something humans have wondered about since the very beginning, the meaning of life. It's perhaps the oldest question we've ever asked ourselves. Why are we here? What's the point of all this? Is there something we're supposed to be doing, or becoming, or understanding? And beneath those questions lie others, just as profound. These aren't questions with simple answers, and that's part of their beauty. They invite us into a conversation that's been unfolding for thousands of years across cultures and continents through philosophy and religion, science and art. Tonight, we'll walk through 100 facts about this eternal question, not to find the definitive answer, because perhaps there isn't just one, but to explore the many ways humans have tried to understand what makes life meaningful. From ancient Greece to modern psychology, from Buddhist temples to Stoic philosophers, from the darkest concentration camps to the brightest moments of human connection. Each tradition, each thinker, each approach offers us something, a different lens through which to view our existence. You'll hear about existentialists who say we create our own meaning, about psychologists who've studied what makes people truly flourish, about philosophers who found peace in accepting what they cannot control, about spiritual traditions that see suffering as a path to liberation. Some of what you hear tonight might resonate deeply. Other ideas might feel foreign or challenging. That's okay. You're not here to memorize or to judge. You're here to rest, to drift, to let these ideas wash over you like gentle waves. And if some of them stick with you, if some of them spark something, well, that's just a quiet gift in the darkness. Before we begin, if these calm explorations help you unwind or give you a peaceful way to end your day, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one thoughtful soul at a time. Now, let's begin our journey into meaning. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's explore together what it means to be human, to be here, to be alive in this vast and mysterious universe. Philosophical foundations. The search for life's meaning begins in ancient Greece 2,500 years ago, in a time when philosophy was still young and fresh. Fact 1. Aristotle believed the meaning of life was eudaimonia, often translated as happiness or flourishing, but meaning something deeper than momentary pleasure. It's a state of living well, of actualizing your potential as a human being. For Aristotle, this wasn't about feeling good, though that might come along with it. It was about being good, about developing your character and your capacities in the fullest way possible. He saw humans as having a unique function, just as a knife has the function of cutting well. Our function, he believed, was to use our rational minds to guide virtuous action. When we do this consistently, we flourish. We become what we're capable of becoming. Fact 2. Aristotle taught that virtue, or excellence of character, is essential to a meaningful life. He identified virtues like courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice. And he said these aren't innate. We have to cultivate them through practice. Think of learning to play an instrument. At first, the notes are awkward, the rhythm uncertain. But through patient repetition, through making mistakes and trying again, you become skilled. Virtue works the same way. You become brave by acting bravely, even when you're afraid. You become generous by giving, even when you'd rather hold tight. And over time, these actions shape who you are. They become part of your character, woven into the fabric of your being. Fact 3. The ancient Greeks distinguished between hedonic and eudaimonic well-being, a distinction that still matters in modern psychology. Hedonic well-being is about pleasure and pain, about feeling good and avoiding discomfort. It's the satisfaction of a good meal, the comfort of a warm bed, the joy of laughter. These things matter, absolutely. But eudaimonic well-being is deeper. It's about living a life of purpose and meaning, about engaging your values and contributing to something beyond yourself. Research shows that while both types of well-being contribute to a good life, eudaimonic well-being tends to have longer-lasting effects on our satisfaction and mental health. The pleasure of eating ice cream fades quickly. The sense of meaning from helping someone in need can stay with us for years. Fact 4. Socrates famously declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. He spent his days in the marketplace of Athens, asking questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is the good life? He didn't claim to have answers. Instead, he exposed the contradictions in others' confident assertions, showing them that what they thought they knew, they didn't really understand at all. This wasn't meant to be cruel or arrogant. Socrates believed that recognizing our ignorance is the first step toward wisdom. When we stop assuming we already know the answers, we can start genuinely seeking truth. We can examine our beliefs, question our habits, and think deeply about how we're living. This examination, this constant inquiry into ourselves and our values, is itself a crucial part of meaning. Fact 5. Many philosophical traditions have converged on the idea that meaning comes from living in accordance with something larger than yourself. For the ancient Greeks, it was reason and virtue. For religious traditions, it's divine will or spiritual truth. For humanists, it might be human dignity or the flourishing of consciousness. The specifics vary, but the pattern holds. Meaning seems to emerge when we connect our individual existence to something that transcends it, when we see ourselves as part of a greater whole. This doesn't mean losing your individuality. Rather, it's about understanding that your individual life gains depth and significance through its connections to others, to ideas, to causes, to beauty, to truth. We are drops in an ocean, and that's precisely what makes each drop matter. Fact 6. Eastern and Western philosophies have often approached the meaning of life differently. Western philosophy, especially in the Greek tradition, tends to emphasize individual reason, personal virtue, and the pursuit of truth through logical inquiry. Eastern traditions like Buddhism and Taoism often focus more on harmony, acceptance, and the dissolution of the separate self. Yet both recognize that suffering is part of existence, and both offer paths toward dealing with that suffering. The Western approach often involves strengthening the self, developing virtues, using reason to navigate life's challenges. The Eastern approach more often involves softening the boundaries of self, recognizing interconnection, accepting impermanence. Neither is right or wrong. They're different lenses on the same human experience, and we can learn from both. Fact 7. The question of life's meaning became especially urgent during and after the world wars of the 20th century. When millions of lives were destroyed, when human cruelty reached unimaginable depths, when the comfortable assumptions of progress and civilization crumbled, people faced a crisis of meaning. How do we make sense of existence in the face of such horror? How do we find purpose when it seems like the universe is indifferent to our suffering? This crisis gave rise to existentialism, a philosophy that confronts these dark questions directly. Rather than turning away from the absurdity and meaninglessness, existentialist thinkers dove into it, trying to find a way through, not around. Fact 8. Throughout history, most cultures have turned to religion to answer questions about life's meaning. Gods, creation myths, sacred texts, these provided frameworks for understanding why we're here and what we should do. Religion offers not just answers, but also community, ritual, a sense of belonging to something ancient and enduring. For billions of people throughout history and today, the meaning of life is intimately tied to their relationship with the divine. Prayer, worship, following commandments, striving for enlightenment, these aren't just activities. They're the very substance of a meaningful existence. Even for those who don't consider themselves religious, these traditions have shaped how we think about purpose, morality, and transcendence. Fact 9. In the modern era, as religious certainty has waned for many people, we've seen a search for meaning in other places. Science, art, politics, relationships, personal growth. These have become new sources of significance. Some see this as a loss, the erosion of shared values and communal meaning. Others see it as liberation, the freedom to craft our own sense of purpose without inherited dogma. Perhaps it's both. We've gained freedom and lost certainty. We can choose our path, but must create it ourselves without a universal map. This freedom can feel exhilarating or terrifying, depending on the day, depending on the person. Fact 10. One enduring insight across philosophical traditions is that the question itself, the seeking of meaning, is part of what makes us human. We are the creatures who ask why. Other animals live, eat, reproduce, survive. They don't, as far as we know, lie awake wondering about the point of it all. This capacity for self-reflection, for existential questioning, is uniquely human. And perhaps the meaning of life isn't to be found in some final answer, but in the asking itself. In the wondering, the searching, the continual engagement with the deepest questions. We are meaning-seeking creatures. That's part of our nature, part of what defines us. Think about it for a moment. As far as we can observe and understand, no other species appears to wonder whether their existence has purpose in the way humans do. A bird builds its nest, raises its young, migrates with the seasons, all without asking why. It simply lives according to its nature. But humans are different. We stand apart from our own lives and examine them. We question not just how to survive, but how to live well. This self-awareness, this ability to reflect on our own existence, is both a gift and a burden. It allows us to plan, to create, to transcend our immediate circumstances. But it also opens us to existential anxiety, to the vertigo of too many possibilities, to the weight of choosing who we'll become. Throughout history, different cultures have developed their own approaches to these eternal questions. The ancient Egyptians believed meaning came from preparing for the afterlife, from building monuments that would endure, from pleasing the gods. The ancient Chinese philosophers debated whether meaning comes from following the natural way, the Tao, or from fulfilling social roles according to Confucian virtue, or from withdrawing from society to contemplate nature. Indigenous cultures often found meaning in connection to land, ancestors, and community, in maintaining balance with the natural world, in passing down stories and traditions. In medieval Europe, meaning was largely defined by Christian theology. Life was preparation for eternity. Your purpose was to save your soul, to follow God's commandments, to earn your place in heaven. This provided a clear, comprehensive framework. Everyone knew their role in the divine order, from peasant to king. The meaning of life was given, not chosen. This could be comforting, the certainty of knowing your place and purpose. But it could also be oppressive, especially if your place in the hierarchy was low. or if you doubted the religious teachings but had no alternative framework. The Renaissance and Enlightenment began to challenge these certainties. Thinkers started emphasizing human reason and individual autonomy. Maybe we could figure out meaning for ourselves through philosophy and science without relying solely on religious authority. This shift accelerated with the Industrial Revolution and modernization. Traditional ways of life broke down. People moved to cities, left behind extended families and village communities. The old sources of meaning, religion, tradition, social role, began to weaken. This created both opportunity and crisis. Freedom from rigid structures, but also loss of the clear frameworks that once gave life coherence. Today, in the modern West, we face what some call a crisis of meaning. Religious belief has declined for many. Traditional communities have weakened. Work is often unfulfilling, just a means to earn money rather than a calling or craft. Social media creates a simulacrum of connection without real intimacy. Political tribalism divides us. The pace of change is dizzying. Many people feel unmoored, lacking a sense of purpose or belonging. This isn't universal. Many people still find meaning in traditional sources. But for a significant portion of the population, especially younger generations, the question of life's meaning feels more urgent and more difficult than ever. And yet, or perhaps because of this, we're also seeing renewed interest in philosophy, psychology, spirituality, practices that help people find meaning. Mindfulness meditation has gone mainstream. Stoicism has experienced a revival. Self-help books about purpose and fulfillment proliferate. People are hungry for guidance, for frameworks that can help them navigate life meaningfully. This is actually encouraging. It means people care. They're not giving in to nihilism or despair. They're searching, questioning, trying to figure out how to live well. And that search, that refusal to accept meaninglessness, is itself meaningful. Existentialism and freedom. Fact 11. Existentialism begins with a radical claim that existence precedes essence. This phrase comes from Jean-Paul Sartre, perhaps the most famous existentialist philosopher. What does it mean? For most of human history, people believed we have an essence, a fundamental nature or purpose given to us by God, by nature, or by some cosmic order. We exist to fulfill that essence. But Sartre flips this. He says we first exist. We're thrown into the world, and only then do we create our essence through our choices and actions. There's no predetermined purpose written into us. We define ourselves as we go. This is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because there's no instruction manual, no guarantee we'll get it right. Liberating because we're free to become whoever we choose. Fact 12. With this freedom comes radical responsibility. If we create our own essence, if there's no cosmic blueprint, then we can't blame God, fate, or human nature for who we become. We are responsible for our choices and their consequences. Sartre goes even further. He argues that when we make a choice, we're not just choosing for ourselves. We're saying something about what we think humans in general should do. When I choose honesty over deception, I'm implicitly saying honesty is valuable for everyone. This weight of responsibility can feel crushing. Every choice carries enormous significance, but existentialists would say this is simply the truth of our condition. We might as well face it honestly rather than hiding behind excuses and self-deception. Fact 13. Soren Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism, wrote about the leap of faith. He lived in the 1800s, long before Sartre, and he was deeply concerned with religious faith. Kierkegaard saw that rational argument could never prove God's existence or the truth of Christianity. there would always be doubt, always be uncertainty. And yet, he believed, we must choose. We must make what he called a leap of faith, committing ourselves fully, despite the lack of certainty. This applies beyond religion. In many crucial life choices, careers, relationships, values, we can never have complete certainty. We gather what information we can, we reflect, but ultimately we must leap. We must commit ourselves to a path knowing we might be wrong. Living authentically means making these leaps rather than staying paralyzed by doubt. Fact 14. Albert Camus, another existentialist thinker, grappled with what he called the absurd. The absurd, for Camus, is the conflict between our human need for meaning and the universe's apparent indifference. We crave purpose, coherence, significance. But the universe offers none. It simply is, vast and uncaring. This is the absurd situation we find ourselves in. So, what do? Camus rejects suicide, saying that would be escaping the question rather than answering it. He also rejects what he calls philosophical suicide, leaping into religious faith or ideology to escape the absurd. Instead, he says we must accept the absurd, acknowledge it fully, and then live anyway. We must imagine Sisyphus happy, he wrote, referring to the Greek myth of a man condemned to roll a boulder up a hill forever. Even in a meaningless universe, we can find joy in the struggle itself. Fact 15. Simone de Beauvoir, existentialist and feminist philosopher, explored how our freedom is shaped by social conditions. She's famous for saying, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." By this she meant that what we call feminine isn't some innate essence, but a set of behaviors and expectations imposed by society. We become gendered through socialization, not biology. This applies more broadly. We're always situated in particular historical, cultural, and social contexts that shape what choices seem possible to us. Poor people and rich people, people of different races and genders, have very different freedoms in practice. True existentialism, de Beauvoir argued, must acknowledge these social realities. Freedom isn't just an abstract philosophical concept. It's a concrete condition that varies based on power and privilege. Fact 16. Existentialists emphasize authenticity, being true to yourself rather than conforming to what others expect. But what does it mean to be authentic? It's not about following your every impulse or rejecting all social norms. Rather, it's about owning your choices, recognizing that you're free to choose, even when you feel pressured or constrained. An authentic person acknowledges their freedom and takes responsibility for their decisions. They don't hide behind roles or excuses. When you say, "I have no choice, I must do this," you're usually denying your freedom. The authentic response is, "I choose to do this because," or even, "I find myself doing this and I need to examine why." Authenticity requires brutal honesty with yourself about your motives and values. Fact 17. Existentialism recognizes that freedom often brings anxiety. Kierkegaard wrote extensively about anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. When you recognize that you could choose differently, that your life isn't predetermined, it can feel vertiginous, like standing at the edge of a cliff. Below you are all the possibilities, all the paths you might take, and you have to choose knowing you can't see the outcome. This anxiety isn't a disorder to be cured. It's an appropriate response to the human condition. Of course you feel anxious when facing the weight of freedom and responsibility. The existentialist doesn't try to escape this anxiety. but learns to live with it, to see it as a sign of being fully alive and awake to your situation. Fact 18. Bad faith is a central concept in Sartre's philosophy. It means lying to yourself about your freedom, pretending you have no choice when you actually do. A classic example is the waiter who over-identifies with his role, who moves in an exaggerated, mechanical way, as if being a waiter is all he is. He's in bad faith because he's pretending he has no choice but to be this particular kind of waiter, when really, he's choosing it. We all fall into bad faith sometimes. We say, I'm just that kind of person, or I can't help it. That's how I was raised. While our past influences us, it doesn't determine us completely. Acknowledging our ongoing freedom, even when it's uncomfortable, is part of living authentically. Fact 19. Existentialists emphasize engagement and commitment. Yes, life has no inherent meaning, but that doesn't mean we should withdraw or become apathetic. Quite the opposite. We should throw ourselves into projects, relationships, causes we care about. We should commit fully, knowing that these commitments give our lives meaning, even if that meaning isn't cosmically guaranteed. Sartre was politically active throughout his life, committed to socialist causes. Camus worked as a journalist and resisted fascism. They didn't sit in ivory towers pondering meaninglessness. They engaged with the world, made choices, took stands. Their philosophy wasn't abstract theory, but a guide for how to live. Fact 20. The existentialist perspective on meaning is ultimately affirmative, despite its reputation for darkness. Yes, there's no inherent meaning. Yes, we face absurdity and anxiety. Yes, we're radically free and responsible, but this means we have the power to create meaning. We're not trapped in a predetermined script. We can author our own lives, make our own choices, become who we decide to be. This is difficult, no question, but it's also empowering. You're not defined by your past, your circumstances, or anyone else's expectations. You define yourself through your choices, moment by moment, day by day. In a universe without inherent meaning, you are the creator of meaning in your own life. This is where existentialism reveals its revolutionary and revolutionary nature. For millennia, humans looked outside themselves for meaning, to gods, to kings, to nature, to tradition. Existentialism says no, look within. Look to your freedom, your choices, your commitments. This shift is both terrifying and exhilarating. Terrifying because there's no safety net, no cosmic guarantee that you're doing it right. Exhilarating because you're free, truly free, in a way that people bound by tradition or divine command never were. Consider what this means in practice. You wake up each morning and the day stretches before you, full of possibilities. You could be kind or cruel. You could work hard or slack off. You could reach out to an old friend or let the relationship fade. You could pursue a dream or give in to fear. Each choice, however small, is an act of self-creation. You're not just doing things, you're defining who you are. This applies to big decisions too. Career, relationships, where to live, what values to uphold. These aren't just practical matters, they're existential ones. Through them, you're creating the meaning of your life. Existentialism also emphasizes the importance of projects. A project is something you're committed to, something that organizes your time and energy over an extended period. It could be a career, raising children, creating art, building a business, pursuing a cause. Projects give life structure and direction. They pull you forward. When you have a project you care about, you have a reason to get up in the morning. You're not just passing time. You're building something, working towards something. And through your projects, You create meaning. You leave a mark on the world, however small. But existentialism warns against hiding behind your projects or roles. This is the danger of bad faith, of using external structures to avoid your freedom. Some people identify so completely with their role, I'm a doctor, I'm a mother, I'm a soldier, that they forget they're more than that role. They're a person who chose that role and could choose differently. When your identity becomes too rigid, too tied to external definitions, you lose touch with your freedom. You become a thing rather than a person, playing a part rather than living authentically. Existentialists also grapple with the relationships between individual freedom and social life. We don't live in isolation. We're always in relation to others. Sartre wrote about the look, the experience of being seen by another person. When someone looks at you, you become aware of yourself as an object in their perception. You're no longer just a free subject, but also a thing to be seen, judged, categorized. This can feel constraining. Other people seem to pin you down, to limit your freedom by their perceptions and expectations. And yet, we need others. We become who we are through our relationships. The challenge is to engage with others without losing yourself, to be influenced without being determined, to care about others' perceptions without being enslaved by them. De Beauvoir explored this especially in the context of gender and oppression. Women, she argued, have historically been defined by men's perceptions, made into objects rather than recognized as free subjects. This is true of all oppressed groups. The powerful define the powerless, limiting their freedom, constraining what seems possible for them. Liberation, then, requires both material changes, changing laws, institutions, economic conditions, and existential changes, reclaiming one's freedom, refusing to accept others' definitions, creating oneself anew. This is why existentialism has been so influential in liberation movements. It provides a philosophical foundation for resisting oppression and claiming autonomy. The relationship between existentialism and ethics is complicated. If there's no cosmic meaning, no divine commandments, what's the basis for morality? Some critics accuse existentialism of moral relativism. If everyone creates their own meaning, doesn't that mean anything goes? But existentialists reject this. Sartre argued that when you choose, you're not just choosing for yourself, but choosing what you think a human should do. Your choices are an implicit recommendation. If you lie, you're saying lying is acceptable. If you help someone, you're saying people should help each other. This creates ethical weight without requiring belief in objective moral law. Moreover, existentialists emphasize responsibility not just to yourself, but to others. You're responsible for the impact of your choices on other people. You're responsible for the world you help create through your actions. This is heavier, in some ways, than traditional morality based on rules. Rules can be followed mechanically. Existential responsibility requires constant awareness, constant choice, constant engagement. You can't just follow the rules and wash your hands of the consequences. You must own your choices fully, including their effects on others. Finally, existentialism offers a perspective on death that's both stark and strangely comforting. Death is inevitable, non-negotiable, the one certainty in an uncertain life. For some people, this is the ultimate proof of meaninglessness. If we all die, if everything ends, what's the point? But existentialists flip this. Death is what makes life meaningful, because your time is limited, your choices matter. Because this life is all you have, you'd better live it well. Death doesn't negate meaning. It creates the conditions for meaning. It's the deadline that makes procrastination impossible, the scarcity that makes life precious. Viktor Frankl and logotherapy Fact 21. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, developed a therapeutic approach called logotherapy, which is based on the idea that the primary human drive is not pleasure, as Freud claimed, or power, as Alfred Adler suggested, but the search for meaning. Frankl called this the will to meaning. According to his observations and clinical work, people can endure almost any suffering if they have a reason to do so, if they can find meaning in their suffering. Conversely, even a comfortable life can feel empty and unbearable if it lacks meaning. This insight came not just from his therapeutic practice, but from his experience in Nazi concentration camps, where he observed that those who maintained a sense of purpose, whether a goal, a loved one they hoped to see again, or an unfinished task, appeared more resilient in facing the horrific conditions. Fact 22. Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, chronicles his experiences in concentration camps and explains his philosophy. It's a slim volume, but it's one of the most influential books of the 20th century, translated into dozens of languages and read by millions. In the first part, Frankl describes the camps with unflinching honesty, the suffering, the dehumanization, the daily confrontation with death. But he focuses less on the horrors themselves than on how people responded to them. Some prisoners gave up, surrendered to despair. Others maintained their dignity, helped fellow prisoners, found tiny ways to assert their humanity. Frankl saw that even in the worst circumstances imaginable, people could choose their attitude. The Nazis could take everything: freedom, food, family. But they couldn't take the last of human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's attitude toward one's suffering. Fact 23. Logotherapy identifies 3 primary ways to find meaning in life. The first is through creating a work or doing a deed, through accomplishment and achievement. This could be your career, a creative project, building something, contributing to your field. The second is through experiencing something or encountering someone, through love, beauty, truth, nature, art. The third, and perhaps most profound, is through the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. When we cannot change a situation, when we must endure something painful, we're challenged to change ourselves, to grow through the suffering, to find meaning in how we bear it. Not all suffering is meaningful. Frankl isn't romanticizing pain. But when suffering is unavoidable, we can still choose how we respond, and that choice can create meaning. Fact 24. Frankl emphasizes that meaning is unique and specific to each person and each situation. There's no universal meaning that applies to everyone. Instead, life asks questions of us, and we must answer through our actions. Each person's life situation poses unique challenges and opportunities, and meaning emerges from our responses to these specific situations. This is different from some religious or philosophical views that prescribe a single path for everyone. Logotherapy respects individual uniqueness. Your meaning isn't necessarily the same as mine. What makes your life meaningful might be different tomorrow than it is today. We must continually discover and rediscover meaning in the changing circumstances of our lives. Fact 25. One of logotherapy's key techniques is called dereflection. Many people become trapped in excessive self-focus, obsessing over their problems, their anxiety, their inadequacies. This hyper-reflection actually makes things worse. The more you focus on trying to sleep, the harder it becomes to sleep. The more you focus on your social anxiety, the more anxious you feel. Dereflection means shifting your attention away from yourself, towards something beyond yourself, toward a task, a person, a cause. This isn't denial or avoidance. It's recognizing that meaning is found not by looking inward, but by looking outward, by engaging with the world and with others. When you focus on serving someone else or creating something worthwhile, your personal problems often diminish in importance. Fact 26. Another logotherapy technique is paradoxical intention. This involves doing or wishing for the very thing you fear. If you're afraid of blushing in public, you try to blush as much as possible. If you're afraid of not falling asleep, you try to stay awake. This breaks the cycle of anticipatory anxiety. When you fear something, you focus on it, which often makes it happen, which confirms your fear. Paradoxical intention interrupts this cycle by removing the fight against the symptom. It adds a bit of humor and distance. Instead of fighting your anxiety, you observe it, even encourage it. Paradoxically, this often reduces or eliminates the symptom. It's a clever psychological jujitsu, using the force of your fear against itself. Fact 27. Frankl believed that humans have a capacity for self-detachment, the ability to step back from ourselves and observe our own thoughts and feelings. This is related to what later psychologists would call metacognition or mindfulness. We're not identical to our thoughts. We're the awareness that notices thoughts arising and passing. This self-detachment allows us to choose how we respond, rather than being controlled by our immediate reactions. As is often expressed in the logotherapy tradition, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This space might be just a moment, but it's enough to change everything. Fact 28. Logotherapy acknowledges what Frankl called the tragic triad of human existence: pain, guilt, and death. We all experience suffering. We all make mistakes and carry regrets. We all must die. These are unavoidable facts of life. Many philosophies and therapies try to minimize or deny these realities. Logotherapy faces them squarely, but facing them doesn't lead to despair. Instead, Frankl argues that we can transform these negative aspects of life into something positive. We can grow through suffering, learn from guilt, and find meaning in our mortality. Death gives life urgency and significance. If we live forever, nothing would matter. It's precisely because our time is limited that our choices count. Fact 29. Frankl distinguished between different types of values. Creative values are what we give to the world through our work and deeds. Experiential values are what we receive from the world: beauty, love, joy. Attitudinal values are the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering. He argued that even when creative and experiential values are no longer available, when we're too ill to work or too isolated to love, we still have attitudinal values. We can still choose how we face our limitations. This is why meaning is available even in the darkest circumstances. As long as we're conscious, we can take a meaningful attitude toward our situation. Fact 30. Logotherapy has influenced many modern psychological approaches. Elements of it appear in cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and existential psychology. The idea that meaning is central to mental health, that we need not just to reduce symptoms, but to help people find purpose, has become increasingly mainstream. Positive psychology, which emerged at the end of the 20th century, echoes many of Frankl's ideas about meaning, growth, and human potential. His work reminds us that therapy isn't just about fixing what's wrong. It's about helping people discover and live out what makes their lives worth living. And that's a lesson with implications far beyond the therapy room. It speaks to how all of us might approach our lives, Stoicism and virtue. Fact 31. Stoicism was a school of philosophy founded in ancient Athens in the early 3rd century BC, but flourished most notably in Rome. Its most famous practitioners include the slave-turned-philosopher Epictetus, the playwright and advisor Seneca, and the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Despite their vastly different social positions, these men shared a common philosophy, a practical approach to living well in an unpredictable world. Stoicism teaches that while we cannot control most of what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. This distinction between what we control and what we don't want is fundamental to Stoic thought and remains profoundly relevant today. Fact 32. The central Stoic teaching is the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, our judgments, our values, our responses, our efforts. Most things are not up to us, other people's behavior, the weather, the past, the future, our health, our reputation, whether we succeed or fail at external goals. The key to peace of mind is to focus our energy entirely on what we control and to accept calmly what we don't. This doesn't mean not caring about external things. Of course, you prefer health to sickness, success to failure, but you don't make your happiness dependent on these preferences being met. You do your best, then accept whatever outcome arises. This radical acceptance isn't passivity, it's a form of deep engagement combined with equanimity. Fact 33. Stoics believe the purpose of life is to live according to virtue. Virtue, for the Stoics, means excellence of character, specifically wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These 4 cardinal virtues are interdependent. True courage requires wisdom to know what's worth being courageous about. Justice requires temperance to moderate self-interest. If you're pursuing virtue, you're living well, regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics went so far as to claim that a truly virtuous person could maintain inner tranquility even under extreme suffering, because their character would remain intact. While this may seem like an extreme position, the underlying idea is powerful. If your sense of well-being depends on being a good person, rather than on getting what you want, then you're much less vulnerable to life's inevitable ups and downs. Fact 34. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, from 161 to 180 AD, wrote a book called Meditations that wasn't meant for publication. It was his private journal, a series of notes to himself, written during military campaigns. He was trying to live according to Stoic principles, while bearing enormous responsibilities and facing constant challenges: war, plague, political intrigue, the weight of ruling an empire. His meditations are reminders to himself. Remember, you're going to die. Don't waste time on what doesn't matter. Be tolerant of others' faults. Do your duty. Practice virtue. These aren't abstract philosophical musings. They're the efforts of a real person trying to live well under difficult circumstances. That's why they still resonate. We all face our own versions of these challenges. Fact 35. Stoics practice negative visualization, imagining worst-case scenarios. This might sound pessimistic, but it serves multiple purposes. First, it prepares you psychologically. If you've imagined losing your job, your health, your loved ones, then if these things happen, you're not as shocked. You've rehearsed mentally. Second, it helps you appreciate what you have. When you imagine losing something, you value it more while you have it. Third, it reminds you that everything is temporary, that you don't truly possess anything. Your possessions, your relationships, your life, these are on loan. Recognizing this helps you hold them lightly, to enjoy them without clinging. This isn't morbid, it's realistic, and it can lead to greater gratitude and presence. Fact 36. The Stoics taught that we should view ourselves as citizens of the cosmos, not just members of a particular city or nation. This cosmopolitanism was radical in the ancient world, where local identity was paramount. But Stoics argued that reason is universal. All humans possess it, therefore we're all part of a single community. This means we have obligations to all people, not just those in our tribe. We should treat others with justice and kindness because they're fellow rational beings, fellow members of humanity. This idea influenced later concepts of universal human rights and dignity. It reminds us that our ultimate identity transcends the categories we often use to divide ourselves. Fact 37. Stoic philosophy emphasizes accepting nature, including human nature. They believed in a rational order to the universe, though not necessarily a personal God. Things happen according to nature's patterns. Some events are beyond your control. Other people will sometimes act badly because that's human nature. You'll age, get sick, die. That's nature too. The wise person doesn't rage against these facts. They accept them calmly and focus on what they can influence, their own character and actions. This doesn't mean fatalism. You still try to improve yourself and your situation, but you do so without attachment to specific outcomes, knowing that nature will unfold as it will, regardless of your preferences. Fact 38. Stoics practiced what they called prosouche, or attention. This means being present, aware, mindful of your thoughts and reactions. It's easy to go through life on autopilot, reacting habitually without reflection. Stoicism asks you to pause, to notice what you're thinking and feeling, to examine your judgments. Is that really as terrible as you think? Are you catastrophizing? Are you letting your ego drive your reaction? This constant self-monitoring isn't meant to make you self-conscious or anxious. Rather, it gives you space to choose your response rather than being controlled by your immediate impulses. It's similar to modern mindfulness practices, and indeed, there's a direct line of influence from ancient philosophy to contemporary approaches to mental well-being. Fact 39. The Stoics distinguish between preferred and dispreferred indifference. Indifference are things outside your control: health, wealth, reputation. These are called indifferent because they're not inherently good or bad for your character, which is what truly matters. However, some indifference are preferred. Given a choice, you prefer health to sickness, wealth to poverty. But you don't need these things to be virtuous or happy in the Stoic sense. If you lose them, you can still be a good person. This framework helps you pursue reasonable goals without being devastated if you don't achieve them. You prefer success, but you don't need it for your well-being. This is a subtle but powerful psychological shift. Fact 40. Stoicism is intensely practical. It's not about abstract theorizing, but about how to live well day to day. Stoics recommended daily practices, morning reflection on what challenges you'll face, evening review of how well you lived up to your values. They suggested mental exercises like the view from above, imagining yourself from far away to gain perspective, or remembering death to appreciate life. They advise practicing small discomforts voluntarily, like cold showers or fasting, to build resilience. These practices were meant to transform you gradually, to make philosophy not just something you think about, but something you embody. And that's the ultimate goal of Stoicism, not to make you a philosopher in the academic sense, but to help you become a better, wiser, more virtuous person. Buddhism and suffering. Fact 41. Buddhism began around the 5th or 6th century BC with Siddhartha Gautama, who became known as the Buddha, meaning the awakened one. While the exact dates of his life remain debated by scholars, his teachings have endured for over 2,000 years. He was a prince who lived in luxury, sheltered from suffering. But one day he ventured outside the palace and encountered an old man, a sick person, and a corpse. This shook him profoundly. He realized that suffering, aging, and death are unavoidable. His comfortable life suddenly seemed hollow. So he left the palace, gave up his wealth and family, and spent years seeking spiritual truth. He tried extreme asceticism, nearly starving himself. When that didn't lead to enlightenment, he adopted a middle way, neither indulgence nor extreme deprivation. Finally, sitting under a tree in meditation, he achieved enlightenment, understanding the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. Fact 42. The heart of Buddha's teaching is the 4 noble truths. First, life involves dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but meaning something broader: dissatisfaction, unsatisfactoriness, the inherent unease of existence. Even in pleasant moments, there's an undercurrent of impermanence, a knowledge that this won't last. Second, the cause of dukkha is tanha, craving or attachment. We cling to pleasant experiences, wanting them to continue. We push away unpleasant experiences, wanting them to end. This constant grasping and aversion creates suffering. Third, it's possible to end dukkha by ceasing to crave, by letting go of attachment. Fourth, the path to this cessation is the Eightfold Path, a set of practices including right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Fact 43. Understanding dukkha is crucial. It's often misunderstood as claiming that life is only suffering, which makes Buddhism seem pessimistic. But that's not quite right. Buddhism doesn't deny that pleasant experiences exist. Rather, it says that even pleasure is ultimately unsatisfying because it's impermanent. You enjoy a delicious meal, but soon you're hungry again. You fall in love, but the honeymoon phase fades. You achieve a goal, but the satisfaction is fleeting. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. The Buddha isn't telling you to be miserable. He's pointing out that seeking lasting happiness in temporary things is futile. If you understand this, you can stop chasing an impossible goal and start looking for peace in a different way. Fact 44. The concept of impermanence, or anicca, is central to Buddhist thought. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. This applies to physical objects, which decay and break down, but also to mental states, relationships, identities, everything. Western thinking often resists this. We want things to be stable, permanent, reliable. We want our sense of self to be solid and unchanging. Buddhism says this desire is the problem. When you accept impermanence fully, when you stop clinging to what must inevitably pass, you find peace. This doesn't mean you become indifferent or detached in a cold sense. You can still love, still care, still engage. But you do so with open hands, not grasping desperately. Fact 45. Buddhism teaches anatta, or no self. This is perhaps the most difficult Buddhist concept for Western minds. It seems obvious that you exist, that there's a continuous self, a you who persists through time. But Buddhism argues this is an illusion. What we call the self is actually a collection of changing physical and mental processes. There's no permanent, unchanging essence at the core. When you look closely at your experience, you find thoughts arising and passing, sensations coming and going, but no solid self behind them. This isn't meant to be nihilistic. The point is that much of our suffering comes from clinging to a self that doesn't exist. When you see through this illusion, you're freed from a great deal of anxiety and grasping. Fact 46. The goal of Buddhist practice is nirvana, often translated as enlightenment or liberation. Nirvana literally means blowing out or extinguishing, like a flame going out. What's extinguished is not your existence, but your craving, your ignorance, your delusion. In nirvana, you're free from the cycle of suffering, not because you've escaped to some other realm, but because you've fundamentally transformed your relationship to experience. You still live, feel, engage with the world, but without the constant grasping and aversion that creates suffering. Different Buddhist traditions describe nirvana somewhat differently. Some see it as a state attainable in this life. Others see it as more transcendent. But all agree it represents the highest human possibility, complete freedom from suffering. Fact 47. Meditation is the primary method for developing the insights that lead to liberation. There are many forms of Buddhist meditation, but two main types are concentration practice and insight practice. Concentration meditation, like focusing on the breath, calms and stabilizes the mind. Insight meditation, or vipassana, involves observing your experience closely to see impermanence, suffering, and know self directly, not just intellectually, but in your lived experience. Through sustained practice, you begin to see how your mind creates suffering through its habitual patterns of craving and aversion. And seeing this clearly is the beginning of freedom. Fact 48. Buddhism emphasizes compassion, especially in the Mahayana tradition. Compassion, or karuna, means feeling for others' suffering and wanting to alleviate it. It's not just sympathy or pity, but an active concern for others' well-being. Some Buddhists take a bodhisattva vow, promising not to enter final nirvana until all beings are liberated. This might sound impossible, but it expresses a profound commitment to others. If you truly understand that the self is empty, that boundaries between self and other are constructed, then the distinction between your liberation and others' liberation dissolves. Helping others and helping yourself become the same thing. This is very different from the individualistic enlightenment sometimes imagined in the West. Fact 49. Buddhism has influenced Western psychology and psychotherapy significantly in recent decades. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, all draw on Buddhist principles. Therapists have found that teaching people to observe their thoughts without judgment, to accept difficult emotions rather than fighting them, to recognize impermanence. These strategies are effective for anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and many other conditions. Of course, these therapeutic applications are secular, stripped of the religious elements. But the core insights about how the mind works, about the relationship between thought and suffering, these remain remarkably relevant regardless of whether you subscribe to Buddhist metaphysics. Fact 50. Buddhism offers a vision of meaning that differs from Western existentialism, where existentialists emphasize creating your own meaning through free choice. Buddhists focus on uncovering truth through disciplined practice and insight. The meaning of life, from a Buddhist perspective, isn't something you construct, but something you discover. You discover the nature of reality, the causes of suffering, the path to liberation. This gives life a kind of cosmic meaning, a direction built into the structure of existence itself, not a meaning imposed by a deity, but one inherent in the workings of consciousness and reality. And this meaning points towards something quite specific: the end of suffering, the realization of compassion, the attainment of wisdom. Understanding Buddhism's approach to meaning requires grasping its fundamental worldview. Buddhism sees existence as characterized by three marks: impermanence, suffering, and no self. We've discussed these already, but their implications run deep. If everything is impermanent, then clinging to anything leads to suffering. If suffering is inevitable given the nature of existence, then the wise response is to learn how to relate to suffering differently. If there's no permanent self, then the very thing we're trying to protect and promote doesn't exist in the way we think it does. These aren't just abstract philosophical ideas. They're meant to be seen directly through practice, and seeing them transforms how you live. Buddhist practice isn't primarily about believing certain doctrines. It's about training your mind through meditation and ethical conduct. The Eightfold Path provides a framework. Right understanding means grasping the Four Noble Truths and the nature of reality. Right intention means cultivating thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness rather than greed, hatred, and cruelty. Right speech means avoiding lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. Right action means not killing, stealing, or engaging in sexual misconduct. Right livelihood means earning your living in ways that don't harm others. Right effort means cultivating wholesome mental states and abandoning unwholesome ones. Right mindfulness means being aware of your body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. Right concentration means developing deep states of meditative absorption. These 8 factors are meant to be developed together, each supporting the others. They're not sequential steps, but interwoven practices. As you develop ethical conduct, meditation becomes easier. As meditation deepens your insight, ethical conduct becomes more natural. As understanding grows, intention purifies. It's a holistic path of transformation. The goal, nirvana, is often misunderstood in the West. It's not annihilation or eternal sleep. It's the extinguishing of greed, hatred, and delusion, the liberation from the cycle of suffering. What remains? Different Buddhist schools give different answers. Theravada Buddhism tends to emphasize nirvana as beyond conception, unable to be described in positive terms. You can only say what it's not. It's not suffering, not conditioned, not impermanent. Mahayana Buddhism often speaks of Buddha nature, an inherent potential for enlightenment present in all beings. Zen emphasizes direct realization beyond words and concepts. Tibetan Buddhism describes various levels of realization and different types of enlightened beings. Despite these differences, all Buddhist traditions agree that liberation is possible, that humans have the capacity to fundamentally transform their experience, to end suffering not by changing external circumstances, but by changing their relationship to experience itself. This is radically empowering. You're not dependent on the world being a certain way for you to be at peace. Peace is a possibility regardless of circumstances, because it's an inner freedom. Buddhism's emphasis on compassion deserves special attention. Compassion isn't just a nice quality, it's central to the Buddhist path. As you practice and begin to see through the illusion of the separate self, compassion arises naturally. When you recognize that the boundaries between self and other are constructed, that we're all suffering in similar ways, that we're all seeking happiness and trying to avoid pain, how can you not feel compassion? The Bodhisattva ideal in Mahayana Buddhism expresses this fully. A Bodhisattva has realized emptiness, has seen through the self, and from that realization chooses to remain in the world to help all beings reach liberation. Their motivation is pure compassion, wanting others to be free from suffering. In practice, this means cultivating loving kindness and compassion through specific meditation practices. You might sit and systematically wish well to yourself, to loved ones, to neutral people, to difficult people, to all beings. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. This isn't just empty words. You're training your mind, reshaping habitual patterns of self-centeredness, opening your heart. Research shows these practices have measurable effects on the brain and on behavior, increasing empathy, reducing bias, enhancing well-being. Buddhism also offers practices for working with difficult emotions that are remarkably sophisticated. Rather than suppressing emotions or being controlled by them, you learn to observe them with mindfulness. You notice anger arising, watch its physical sensations, observe the thoughts that accompany it, see it as a process rather than a fixed state. You neither act on it impulsively nor push it away. You just watch it, and in watching without judgment, it changes. It loses its grip. This applies to all difficult emotions: anxiety, sadness, craving, aversion. They're not problems to be solved, but processes to be understood. The Buddhist approach to meaning also includes a sophisticated analysis of consciousness and how it works. The Abhidharma, Buddhist psychology, breaks experience down into its components, showing how perception, feeling, and conceptualization create our sense of reality. This analysis serves a practical purpose. When you understand how your mind constructs experience, you can intervene in that process, interrupting habitual patterns, creating space for new responses. This is liberating in the most fundamental sense. You're not controlled by automatic reactions. You have choice, awareness, freedom. One of Buddhism's most practical teachings is about desire and aversion. We're constantly pulled toward pleasant experiences and pushed away from unpleasant ones. This creates a kind of restlessness, an inability to simply be with what is. We're always wanting things to be different, better, more pleasurable. Buddhism doesn't say pleasure is bad or that you shouldn't enjoy things, but it does say that making pleasure the goal of life is a setup for suffering, because pleasure is impermanent and the chasing never ends. Real peace comes from a different relationship to experience, one where you can enjoy pleasure when it's present without clinging, and endure pain when it arises without being destroyed by it. This is the middle way, the path between indulgence and asceticism, between hedonism and self-denial. The Buddha tried both extremes and found them wanting. Indulgence doesn't lead to lasting satisfaction. Asceticism doesn't lead to liberation. What works is a balanced approach, taking care of your body and mind without being enslaved to them, enjoying life's pleasures without being controlled by them, engaging with the world without being lost in it. Buddhism has evolved into many forms over 2,500 years, spreading from India across Asia and more recently to the West. Theravada in Southeast Asia, Mahayana in East Asia, Vajrayana in Tibet, Zen in Japan, each with distinct practices and emphases. More recently, secular mindfulness has extracted Buddhist meditation techniques from their religious context, teaching them in hospitals, schools, corporations. Some traditional Buddhists worry this strips the practices of their deeper meaning. Others see it as skillful means, adapting the teachings to new contexts. Either way, Buddhist insights about the mind and suffering have proven remarkably portable and relevant across cultures and centuries. Connection and relationships. Fact 51. Humans are profoundly social creatures. This isn't just preference or culture, it's biology. Our brains are wired for connection. Infants who don't receive adequate social interaction fail to thrive, even if their physical needs are met. Throughout life, our well-being is deeply tied to our relationships. Research has found that loneliness and chronic social isolation are associated with significant health risks, including higher rates of depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, and even early death. Conversely, strong relationships are one of the most consistent predictors of happiness and longevity. This has been demonstrated in numerous studies, including the Harvard study of adult development, which followed men for over 75 years and found that good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Fact 52. The psychologist Abraham Maslow proposed a hierarchy of needs. At the base are physiological needs like food and water, then safety needs, then belongingness and love needs, then esteem needs. Finally, self-actualization, realizing your full potential. Maslow argued that we can't focus on higher needs until lower ones are met, but even with this hierarchy, he placed belonging in the middle as foundational. We need to feel connected, to be part of something, to be loved, and to love. This isn't a luxury, it's a fundamental human requirement, as necessary as physical safety for psychological well-being. Fact 53. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, shows that our early relationships shape how we relate to others throughout life. Infants develop different attachment styles based on how their caregivers respond to them. Secure attachment develops when caregivers are consistently responsive. The child learns that others are reliable, that the world is safe, that they're worthy of love. But if caregivers are inconsistent, unavailable, or neglectful, children may develop anxious or avoidant attachment styles, carrying into adulthood patterns of clinging or distancing in relationships. These patterns aren't fixed. They can change with new experiences and conscious work, but they demonstrate how profoundly our first relationships affect us. Fact 54. Love is one of the most powerful sources of meaning in life. Romantic love, familial love, friendship. These relationships give our lives depth and significance. Viktor Frankl wrote about how thinking of his wife helped him survive the concentration camps. Even when he learned later that she had died, the love he felt, the meaning she gave to his life, remained. Love pulls us outside ourselves. It makes another person's well-being as important as our own. This self-transcendence is itself meaningful. You're no longer just pursuing your own goals, your own pleasure. You're bound up with another person. Their joys and sorrows become yours. This vulnerability, this openness, is both the risk and the reward of love. Fact 55. But relationships aren't always positive sources of meaning. Toxic relationships can be deeply damaging. Abuse, manipulation, constant criticism, these harm mental and physical health. Sometimes the most meaningful act is ending a relationship that's harmful, even if it's difficult, even if you feel guilty. Boundaries are essential. Saying no, choosing yourself, protecting your well-being, these aren't selfish. They're acts of self-respect that make healthier relationships possible. Meaning doesn't come from any relationship at any cost. It comes from relationships characterized by mutual respect, trust, honesty, and care. Fact 56. Friendships often get less attention than romantic relationships, but they're equally important for meaning and well-being. Friends provide companionship, support, shared experiences. They know us over time, witnessing our growth and changes. Good friendships involve reciprocity, both people giving and receiving. They involve authenticity, being yourself rather than performing a role. They involve loyalty, showing up when times are hard. Research shows that having strong friendships is strongly associated with happiness and health. Yet modern life often makes friendship harder. We're busy, we move, we're distracted by screens. Maintaining friendships requires intention and effort, but it's worth it. Fact 57. Community and belonging extend beyond individual relationships. Feeling part of a larger group, a neighborhood, a faith community, a social movement, a team, this provides meaning in a different way. It connects you to something bigger than yourself and your intimate relationships. You're part of a collective story, a shared purpose. This can be incredibly powerful. Think of religious communities gathering weekly, sharing rituals, supporting each other through life's passages. Or activist movements where people work together towards social change. Or even sports teams where fans feel deep identification with the group. These communities give life, structure, meaning, identity. Fact 58. Service to others is a path to meaning that transcends self-interest. When you help someone, volunteer, contribute to your community, you experience what psychologists call the helper's high, a genuine sense of well-being that comes from giving. This isn't just feel-good nonsense. Studies show that volunteering is associated with better mental health, greater life satisfaction, even longer life. Why? Partly because it gets you outside your own problems. When you're focused on helping someone else, your own troubles shrink in importance. And partly because contribution creates meaning. You're making a difference, however small. You're connected to something larger. You matter. Fact 59. The quality of relationships matters more than quantity. You don't need dozens of friends or a huge social network. What you need are a few relationships characterized by genuine connection, where you feel seen, understood, valued for who you really are. A single close friend who really knows you is more valuable than 100 casual acquaintances. This is good news for introverts who might feel pressure to be more social. Deep connection doesn't require being the life of the party. It requires authenticity, vulnerability, and mutual care, which can happen in quiet, intimate settings. Fact 60. In the end, when people reflect on their lives, particularly when they're old or facing death, observations from palliative care workers and researchers suggest that they rarely wish they'd worked more, accumulated more, or achieved more external success. Instead, what people tend to treasure most is relationships, time with loved ones, experiences shared with others, moments of connection and love. This is what gives life its warmth and richness. This is what we remember when everything else fades. The meaning of life in this sense is simple. It's in the people we love and who love us. It's in the moments of genuine connection, the times we felt truly present with another human being. Everything else is secondary, purpose and contribution. Fact 61. Purpose is the sense that your life is directed toward meaningful goals that are larger than immediate self-interest. It's having a why that organizes your actions and gives your days coherence. Research in psychology shows that people with a strong sense of purpose report higher life satisfaction, better mental health, even better physical health, and longer life. Purpose provides resilience. When you have a reason to get up in the morning, you can weather difficulties better. Purpose provides direction. Instead of drifting, you're moving towards something. This doesn't mean you need one grand purpose for your entire life. Purpose can shift and evolve, but at any given time, having a sense of purpose is beneficial. Fact 62. Purpose often involves contribution. making a difference beyond yourself. This could be through your work, raising children, creating art, teaching, activism, caring for aging parents, countless forms. The key is that you're giving something, that your efforts benefit others or advance a cause you believe in. Viktor Frankl emphasized that meaning comes not from what we take from life, but from what we give. When you contribute, you're writing yourself into a larger story. You're part of something that will continue after you're gone. This transcendence of mortality is itself meaningful. Fact 63. Work can be a significant source of purpose, but not all work is inherently meaningful. Some jobs feel purposeful because they directly help people or contribute to something important. Teachers, doctors, nurses, social workers often report high purpose despite often difficult conditions and modest pay. But even less obviously purposeful work can become meaningful if you connect it to larger values. The janitor who sees their work as creating a clean, healthy environment for others. The accountant who helps small businesses succeed. How you frame your work matters as much as what the work is. Finding or creating meaning in work requires seeing beyond the immediate tasks to their broader significance. Fact 64. Erik Erikson, a developmental psychologist, identified generativity as a key challenge of midlife. Generativity means contributing to the next generation, leaving a legacy, creating something that will outlast you. This could be through parenting, mentoring, teaching, creating works of art or science, building institutions, passing on wisdom. Erikson contrasted generativity with stagnation, which is what happens when you focus only on your own needs and pleasures without thinking about your contribution to the future. Research supports Erikson's ideas. People who engage in generative activities report greater well-being and life satisfaction as they age. Fact 65. Creative expression is a powerful way to create meaning. Whether you're writing, painting, composing music, gardening, cooking, building something with your hands, creative acts bring something new into the world. They're a form of contribution and self-expression simultaneously. Creativity doesn't require talent in the conventional sense. It requires willingness to engage, to experiment, to make something. The process itself is meaningful, regardless of whether anyone else appreciates the product. When you create, you're fully engaged, present, using your capacities, and you leave something behind, a trace of your existence, your particular way of seeing and being in the world. Fact 66. Finding your purpose isn't always easy or straightforward. Some people seem to know their calling from youth, but for many, purpose emerges gradually through exploration and experience. You try different things, see what resonates, what draws you back, what gives you energy rather than draining you. You notice what problems in the world call to you, what injustices make you angry, what needs you feel compelled to address. You pay attention to your skills and interests, looking for intersections. Where do your gifts meet the world's needs? That's often where purpose lies. This search is itself a meaningful process, a journey of self-discovery and engagement with the world. Fact 67. Purpose doesn't have to be grand or world-changing. It can be simple and local. Caring well for your family, being a good neighbor, making your workplace a bit more humane, bringing joy to people through humor or hospitality. The scale doesn't matter. What matters is the intention to contribute, to make things better in whatever sphere you occupy. This is liberating. You don't need to solve global poverty or cure cancer to have a purposeful life. You just need to show up where you are and do what you can with care and conscientiousness. Fact 68. Purpose provides what psychologists call intrinsic motivation. This is motivation that comes from within, from valuing the activity itself, rather than extrinsic motivation, which comes from external rewards like money or status. When your work or activities are intrinsically motivating, you do them for their own sake, not for what they get you. This leads to greater persistence, creativity, and satisfaction. Purpose is a powerful source of intrinsic motivation. When you believe what you're doing matters, you don't need as much external incentive. The meaning itself is rewarding. Fact 69. Sometimes purpose emerges from suffering or adversity. Many people who go through difficult experiences, illness, loss, trauma, report that these experiences, while terrible, led them to clarify what really matters. They reevaluate their priorities. They commit to causes related to their suffering, perhaps advocating for others facing similar challenges. This is post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where people report positive changes following trauma. Not everyone experiences this, and it doesn't make the trauma good, but it shows that even terrible events can lead to greater clarity about meaning and purpose. Fact 70. Your sense of purpose can and should evolve over your lifetime. In youth, purpose might center on education and skill development. In early adulthood, career and family. In midlife, contribution and legacy. In older age, wisdom and mentoring. Each stage of life offers different opportunities for meaningful engagement. Expecting one purpose to last forever creates unnecessary pressure. It's okay for your purpose to shift as you grow and change. The constant thread is the intention to engage meaningfully with whatever life stage you're in, to contribute what you can, to use your particular gifts and circumstances to make a difference. Happiness and flourishing. Fact 71. Positive psychology emerged in the late 20th century as a deliberate shift in focus. For decades, psychology had focused primarily on mental illness, on what goes wrong with the human mind. This made sense. Treating suffering is important. But Martin Seligman and others argued that psychology should also study what goes right. What makes people thrive? What are the conditions for flourishing? What can we learn from people who are not just not depressed, but genuinely happy and engaged with life? This wasn't about toxic positivity or ignoring problems. It was about a more balanced approach to human psychology, studying both the valleys and the peaks. Fact 72. Seligman developed the PERMA model of well-being, identifying 5 key elements. P is for positive emotions, experiences of joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, or love. E is for engagement, being absorbed in activities, experiencing flow. R is for relationships, connections with others. M is for meaning, belonging to and serving something bigger than yourself. A is for accomplishment, achieving goals and pursuing mastery. These 5 elements are distinct but interrelated. A life rich in these elements is a flourishing life. They're all valuable, but meaning is often considered the weightiest, the one that ties the others together. Fact 73. The distinction between hedonic and eudaimonic well-being keeps appearing because it's fundamental. Hedonic well-being is about pleasure and comfort, feeling good. Eudaimonic well-being is about purpose and growth, living well. Both matter, but research shows they have different effects. Hedonic well-being feels good in the moment, but doesn't necessarily lead to lasting satisfaction. Eudaimonic well-being might involve effort and discomfort, but it leads to deeper fulfillment. The happiest people aren't those pursuing maximum pleasure, but those living in accordance with their values and contributing to something beyond themselves. This doesn't mean asceticism. It means a balanced life where pleasure has its place but isn't the organizing principle. Fact 74. Gratitude is one of the most studied positive emotions. Keeping a gratitude journal, regularly listing things you're thankful for, has been shown in numerous studies to increase happiness and life satisfaction. Why? Partly because it shifts attention from what's lacking to what's present. Instead of always wanting more, you appreciate what you have. Partly because it counters the hedonic treadmill, our tendency to adapt to positive changes and return to baseline happiness. Gratitude keeps positive things salient, prevents them from fading into the background. Practicing gratitude isn't about being Pollyanna or ignoring problems. It's about cultivating a more balanced perspective. Fact 75. Flow is a state identified by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, where you're completely absorbed in an activity, losing track of time, forgetting self-consciousness. Flow happens when the challenge of an activity matches your skill level. Too easy and you're bored, too hard and you're anxious. Just right and you enter flow. During flow, you're completely present. Your mind isn't wandering to the past or future or to self-criticism. You're just doing. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists talk about the work flowing through them. These are peak experiences, moments when life feels most alive and meaningful. Finding activities that generate flow, whether in work, hobbies, or relationships, is a key to well-being. Fact 76. Savoring is the practice of attending to and appreciating positive experiences, stretching them out rather than rushing through them. When something good happens, you pause to notice it, to let it register fully. You might share it with others, expressing your pleasure. You might take a mental photograph, creating a strong memory. You might reflect on how you created this experience, or how lucky you are to have it. Research shows that people who savor tend to be happier. This makes sense. Life's good moments are fleeting. If you don't pay attention, they slip by unnoticed. Savoring is the art of really being there for the good times, maximizing their impact. Fact 77. Optimism, the tendency to expect good outcomes, is associated with better mental and physical health. Optimists cope better with stress, recover faster from setbacks, persist longer in the face of challenges. But not all optimism is healthy. Unrealistic optimism, ignoring real risks, can be harmful. The healthiest form is flexible optimism, expecting the best but preparing for difficulties, maintaining hope while staying grounded in reality. Pessimism also has a place. Defensive pessimism, imagining worst cases to prepare for them, can reduce anxiety and improve performance for some people. The key is using these mental strategies consciously, rather than being controlled by reflexive patterns. Fact 78. Character strengths are positive traits that different people possess to varying degrees. Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman identified 24 character strengths grouped into 6 virtues: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, transcendence. Everyone has signature strengths, the ones that come most naturally and feel most authentic. Research shows that using your signature strengths regularly is associated with greater happiness and engagement. This makes intuitive sense. When you're doing things that tap into your natural strengths, you feel more competent, more yourself. Identifying and using your strengths is a path to both contribution and personal satisfaction. Fact 79. Positive relationships are so important that they appear in nearly every model of well-being. We've discussed this already, but it bears repeating. No amount of success, wealth, or pleasure compensates for poor relationships. Conversely, strong relationships can sustain you through almost anything. This is consistent across cultures, across time periods. Humans are social creatures. Our deepest satisfactions come from connection. Our resilience in hard times depends largely on social support. If you want to flourish, invest in relationships, time with loved ones, emotional intimacy, helping others. These aren't luxuries or distractions from more important pursuits. They're the substance of a good life. Fact 80. Ultimately, happiness and flourishing aren't simple destinations you arrive at. They're ongoing processes, ways of engaging with life. You don't achieve permanent happiness and then coast. Life keeps happening, bringing new challenges and changes. Flourishing is about how you respond, how you engage, whether you keep growing and contributing and connecting. It's about cultivating certain practices and perspectives that make life richer and more meaningful over time. This is both challenging and encouraging. You can't fail at flourishing by not reaching some final state. You can only fail by giving up on engagement and growth. As long as you keep trying, keep learning, keep loving, you're on the path. Growth and transformation. Fact 81. Personal growth is itself a form of meaning. When you're developing your capacities, overcoming limitations, becoming more of who you can be, life feels purposeful. This is part of what Maslow meant by self-actualization. It's realizing your potential, not in some grandiose sense, but in the everyday sense of becoming a little better, a little wiser, a little more capable. Growth happens through challenge. When things are too easy, we stagnate. When they're overwhelmingly difficult, we give up. Growth happens in the zone between, where we're stretched but not broken. Fact 82. Carl Rogers, a humanistic psychologist, believed humans have an innate drive toward growth and fulfillment, what he called the actualizing tendency. Given the right conditions, supportive relationships, acceptance, freedom to explore, people naturally move toward greater health, complexity, and authenticity. The therapist's job, in Rogers' view, isn't to fix people, but to provide conditions where their own growth process can unfold. This optimistic view of human nature contrasts with Freudian psychoanalysis, which emphasized unconscious conflicts and drives. Rogers believed that at our core, we want to grow, to be authentic, to realize our potential. Obstacles to growth come not from our nature, but from harmful environments and relationships that stunt development. Fact 83. Post-traumatic growth refers to positive psychological changes that can follow trauma. This doesn't mean trauma is good or that growth justifies suffering, but research shows that many people report meaningful changes after facing serious adversity, illness, loss, natural disasters, even war. They report greater appreciation for life, closer relationships, increased personal strength, spiritual development, recognition of new possibilities. Not everyone experiences post-traumatic growth, and those who do would still prefer not to have experienced the trauma. But the phenomenon shows that humans have remarkable capacity for transformation, for finding meaning, even in terrible events. Fact 84. Learning is a lifelong process that contributes to meaning. As you learn, you become more capable, more knowledgeable, more skilled. This is satisfying in itself. But learning also connects you to larger traditions of knowledge and to communities of fellow learners. When you study history, you connect to the past. When you learn science, You participate in humanity's collective attempt to understand nature. When you master a craft, you join a lineage of practitioners. Learning also keeps life interesting. As long as you're curious, as long as you're discovering new things, life retains freshness. The day you stop learning is the day you start dying in a psychological sense. Fact 85. Adversity can be a powerful catalyst for growth, but only if we approach it the right way. Resilience isn't just bouncing back, it's bouncing forward, emerging from difficulty, stronger and wiser than before. This requires certain mindsets, viewing challenges as opportunities rather than threats, maintaining perspective, recognizing that difficulties are temporary and specific rather than permanent and pervasive, finding meaning in the struggle, utilizing social support. These aren't just platitudes. They're strategies that research shows actually help people grow through adversity rather than being broken by it. Fact 86. Embracing change is essential to growth. It's tempting to want things to stay the same, to hold on to what's familiar. But life is constant change. Your body changes. Your circumstances change. Your relationships change. Fighting this causes suffering. The Stoics recognize this. Buddhists teach impermanence. Modern psychology echoes these ancient insights. Flexibility, adaptability, willingness to let go and begin again, these are crucial to well-being. This doesn't mean you can't grieve losses or feel sad about endings. It means you eventually accept them and find new beginnings. Fact 87. Self-compassion is crucial for healthy growth. Kristen Neff has researched self-compassion extensively, defining it as treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend. It has 3 components: self-kindness versus self-judgment, recognizing your shared humanity versus feeling isolated in your struggles, and mindful awareness versus over-identification with difficult emotions. People high in self-compassion handle failure better, take more risks, show greater resilience. Paradoxically, being kind to yourself doesn't make you complacent. It makes you braver, more willing to try and fail and try again, because you know you won't crucify yourself for mistakes. Fact 88. Identity is not fixed, but evolving. Who you are changes over time as you have new experiences, gain new knowledge, face new challenges. This can be unsettling. We want to know who we are, to have a stable sense of self. But fluidity is more accurate to our actual experience. You're different now than you were at 10, at 20, at 40, and you'll continue to change. This is growth. The philosopher Nietzsche spoke of becoming who you are, a paradoxical phrase suggesting that selfhood is an ongoing project, not a given fact. You're always in the process of creating yourself through your choices and experiences. Fact 89. Wisdom is different from knowledge. Knowledge is information. Wisdom is knowing how to use that information well, understanding context, recognizing limitations, seeing connections. Wisdom comes from experience reflected upon. You can't simply acquire wisdom by reading, though reading helps. You need to live, to make mistakes, to face complex situations where there's no clear right answer. And you need to learn from these experiences, to extract lessons, to integrate them into your understanding. As you age, if you're paying attention, you become wiser. This is the compensation for aging's losses, the silver lining. Wisdom gives life, depth, and richness that youth's energy and novelty can't provide. Fact 90. Growth doesn't end at some arbitrary age. You can keep developing throughout life. Research on adult development shows that people continue to mature emotionally and cognitively well into old age. Older adults often show greater emotional regulation, better perspective, deeper wisdom. They're often happier than younger adults despite facing more health challenges and losses. This is called the paradox of aging. How can people be happier when their circumstances are objectively worse? Because they've learned what matters. They've developed inner resources. They've let go of things that don't serve them. Growth isn't just for the young. It's a lifelong process, integration and wisdom. Fact 91. No single approach to meaning captures the whole truth. Existentialism emphasizes freedom and personal responsibility. Stoicism emphasizes virtue and acceptance. Buddhism emphasizes liberation from suffering. Positive psychology emphasizes flourishing. Each offers valuable insights. The wisest approach might be to draw from multiple traditions, using what works for you in different situations. This isn't intellectual inconsistency. It's practical wisdom, using the right tool for the job. Sometimes you need the Stoic's acceptance. Sometimes you need the existentialist's courage to choose. Sometimes you need the Buddhist's mindfulness. Sometimes you need positive psychology's practices for cultivating well-being. Fact 92. Living with uncertainty is part of the human condition. We don't know what happens after death. We don't know whether the universe has purpose. We don't know if our choices will work out. This uncertainty can be anxiety-provoking, but it's also what makes life an adventure rather than a predetermined script. The meaning you create is your own. The life you build is yours. This freedom in the face of uncertainty is both the burden and the gift of being human. Some people find this thought terrifying. Others find it exhilarating. Most of us feel both at different times. Fact 93. The journey versus destination. Distinction is important for meaning. If meaning comes only from achieving goals, what happens when you achieve them? You might feel temporarily satisfied, then empty. If meaning comes from the journey itself, from engaging with life, then it's always available. You don't have to wait to arrive somewhere. Meaning is in the process of growth, learning, creating, connecting, contributing. This doesn't mean goals don't matter. They give direction, but they shouldn't be the sole source of meaning. Find meaning in the striving itself, in showing up, in doing your best, regardless of outcome. This way, you're living meaningfully right now, not waiting for some future accomplishment. Fact 94. Creating your own meaning is both empowering and demanding. No authority can tell you definitively what your life should be about. You have to figure it out yourself. This requires self-knowledge, knowing your values, your strengths, what truly matters to you. It requires courage to pursue your path even when others don't understand or approve. It requires experimentation, trying different things to see what resonates. It requires honesty, admitting when something isn't working and changing direction. Creating meaning is active, ongoing work. It's not something you do once and finish. You do it continuously, making choices that align with your values, adjusting as you learn and grow. Fact 95. Wisdom traditions from different cultures often converge on similar insights. Treat others as you'd like to be treated. Accept what you can't change. Focus on what you can control. Be present. Practice gratitude. Cultivate compassion. Let go of attachment. Live virtuously. These aren't unique to any one tradition. They appear in some form in Greek philosophy, Christianity, Buddhism, Confucianism, Stoicism, indigenous wisdom teachings. This convergence suggests These insights reflect deep truths about human nature and flourishing. You don't need to follow one specific path. The wisdom is available across traditions, waiting for you to discover and apply it. Fact 96. Paradoxes are common in thinking about meaning. The more you pursue happiness directly, the more it eludes you. But when you focus on meaning, purpose, contribution, happiness often follows as a byproduct. The more you try to control everything, the more anxious you become. But when you accept what you can't control, you find peace. The more you cling to pleasure and avoid pain, the more you suffer. But when you accept both as natural parts of life, you find equanimity. These paradoxes can't be resolved logically. They must be lived, experienced directly. Then they make sense in a way beyond words. Fact 97. Community wisdom recognizes that meaning isn't entirely individual. We're shaped by our cultures, our families, our times. We inherit stories, values, practices from those who came before. We pass things on to those who come after. We're links in a chain, part of a larger narrative that extends beyond our individual lives. This gives meaning a dimension of connection and continuity. You're not just creating meaning for yourself. You're participating in your community's ongoing conversation about what matters. You're contributing to shared meaning, to collective purpose. This can be tremendously supportive, though it can also be constraining if the community's values don't align with your own. Fact 98. The search for meaning is itself meaningful. Even when you haven't found clear answers, even when you're still figuring things out, the fact that you're asking the questions, that you care about living well, that you're trying to understand and grow, this is significant. You're engaged with life's deepest issues. You're not sleepwalking through existence. You're awake, questioning, seeking. This engagement is the opposite of nihilism or despair. It's an affirmation of life's value, an expression of hope that meaning can be found or created. The search doesn't have to end for the journey to be worthwhile. Fact 99. Your mortality gives your life meaning. If you lived forever, nothing would be urgent. Choices wouldn't matter as much. You could always try again, start over, but you have limited time. This scarcity makes your time valuable. Each day matters because there are only so many. Each relationship matters because it won't last forever. Each choice matters because you can't do everything. Death is what gives life its poignancy, its intensity, its meaning. This isn't morbid. It's recognizing that finitude is part of what makes life precious. As Stoics understood, remembering death helps you appreciate life and live more fully. Fact 100. In the end, meaning might not be something you find or create, but something you recognize. Perhaps life is inherently meaningful, and our task is to see this, to wake up to the significance that's always been there. Each moment is precious. Each person you meet is unique and unrepeatable. Each experience is rich with possibility. The world is full of beauty and mystery. Love is real. Kindness matters. You are here, alive, conscious, capable of thought and feeling and choice. Isn't that remarkable? Maybe the meaning of life is simply to be alive, to be present, to experience it all, the joy and the sorrow, the connection and the solitude, the growth and the loss. To show up fully, to care deeply, to love well, to do what you can with what you have, to be human. Conclusion. And now we've reached the end of our journey through 100 facts about the meaning of life. We've traveled through ancient Greece and modern psychology, through concentration camps and meditation halls, through Stoic Rome and existentialist France. We've heard from philosophers and psychologists, from spiritual teachers and survivors, all asking the same essential questions. Why are we here? What should we do? How should we live? The answers vary, but certain themes recur. Meaning comes from connection, from relationships and love. It comes from contribution, from making a difference beyond yourself. It comes from growth, from becoming more of who you can be. It comes from virtue, from being a good person. It comes from acceptance, from making peace with life's unchangeable realities. It comes from engagement, from showing up fully for whatever life brings. It comes from freedom, from taking responsibility for your choices. It comes from presence, from being awake to each moment. These aren't easy principles to live by. They require courage, honesty, persistence. They require facing difficult truths about existence, about suffering, about mortality. But they offer something valuable, a way to live that feels purposeful and rich, that makes the struggles worthwhile. You don't need to adopt any particular philosophy wholesale. You don't need to believe in God or the soul or cosmic purpose. You don't need to become a Stoic or a Buddhist or an existentialist. You can take what resonates and leave the rest. You can create your own synthesis, your own understanding. What matters is that you engage with these questions, that you don't just drift through life on autopilot, but pause to ask yourself what really matters to you. What are your values? What are your strengths? What calls to you? What contribution can you make? What relationships do you want to nurture? What person do you want to become? These aren't questions with final answers. They're questions to return to again and again throughout your life as you grow and change and face new circumstances. The meaning of life isn't something you discover once and settle. It's something you create and recreate continuously through your choices, your attention, your commitments. It's in how you treat people. It's in what you give your time and energy to. It's in whether you're living according to your values or betraying them. It's in whether you're growing or stagnating. It's in whether you're present or checked out. Moment by moment, choice by choice, you're writing the story of your life. Make it a good story. Make it meaningful. And remember, you're not alone in this search. Billions of people before you have grappled with these same questions. Billions alive today are doing so. We're all trying to figure it out, trying to live well, trying to make sense of this strange gift of existence. Share your struggles, share your insights, support others on their journeys, learn from those who've gone before, teach those who come after. We're in this together, connected by our shared humanity, our common search for meaning. If these reflections have given you something to think about, if they've offered any comfort or clarity or inspiration, I'm glad. That's why I make these videos, to create a space for deep thought and peaceful rest, to explore the big questions in a gentle way. If you'd like more of these calm journeys through ideas and mysteries, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Whispered Knowledge. It helps others find their way here, creates a community of thoughtful, curious souls. For now, though, rest well. Let these ideas settle. Let your mind drift where it will. You don't need to figure everything out tonight. The questions will still be there tomorrow, waiting for you. And that's okay. That's part of being human. Living with the questions, sitting with the mystery, finding meaning in the search itself. Good night. Sleep deeply, and may your life be rich with meaning, however you find it or create it. May you love well and live well and become who you're meant to be, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of presence and connection and growth at a time. The meaning of life is yours to discover, yours to create, yours to live. Sweet dreams.